Congrats, man.
That's cool. Teamwork, spirit, community. Lower decks. Lower decks.
What's up, Lore Masters? Before I get too far into this, let me address a criticism that I'm still having to recognize as I see it in my comments almost every day. Yes, I know this is outside of what I've historically created for the channel. There are two things to that. First, for channels to continue to grow, they have to expand. There are literally only so many ways to do breakdowns of ships and only so much lore to go through. Secondly, if Star Trek is to actually thrive, if not survive, it's important we have conversations regarding the new stuff that comes out. Because if everything that comes out just hates it because it's new, then no one is doing anyone any favors. When something is done right, that needs to be acknowledged. Getting into the topic proper, there are two problems that I think Star Trek Lower Decks suffers from when it comes to its launch. First, it had the unfortunate honor of preceding both Star Trek Discovery as well as Star Trek Picard. These two shows were distinctly different from Legacy Trek, and at least Star Trek Discovery was plagued with being a part of current era political quagmires. This was, of course, a self-inflicted wound by Star Trek Discovery as they embraced this quagmire and didn't care who they hurt. Because of this, it's no surprise that channels, websites, and others have been highly critical of any disco-era Trek, and even primed to hate Trek and nitpick the living hell out of anything currently produced in this day and age. At this point, at least in my opinion, a lot of these criticisms are now unfair. That said, there are a few actual legitimate concerns that some have brought up. First, it is an adult cartoon. No, it's not Rick and Morty, but it is still plagued by the tropes of what a cartoon presents. Additionally, it's a comedy, in theory at least, and thus will have comedic pieces to it. If you don't like adult cartoons and you don't think Trek should be a comedy, you aren't going to have a good time. That's not actually even a bad reason to say you don't enjoy it. Unlike listening to what 4chan's criticisms are, there is some depth and nuance in thinking that Trek shouldn't be a cartoon, nor a comedy. These are aspects that Gene Roddenberry would have most likely hated, especially the cartoon piece. The other reason that I have found to be valid is that Lower Decks is a look at an unimportant ship with unimportant people. At least that's what was on the tin. Luckily, I think this was a bit overblown and not exactly true. But when we look at Star Trek, it has always focused on the pinnacle of human success. So the basis of the show, the Lower Decks, and a ship that does second contact, is somewhat the antithesis of Trek's original goal. These are some legitimate reasons not to like the series. I'm sure there are others as well, though I've yet to hear them. However, I mean it when I sincerely say that I believe Lower Decks saved Star Trek. Just hear me out. There are some aspects that define Star Trek. Well, most Star Trek at least. The characters, the setting, and it being in space, being a part of Starfleet, as well as often having moral quandaries that consistently come up. Though they aren't required for every episode, they are prevalent. We'll go back to the characters very shortly, but let's look at the other two aspects first. Lower Decks is set in the universe of Star Trek and specifically focuses on Star Trek officers, so we've hit that Legacy Trek box. Well, again, it doesn't have to be every episode, but let's look at the first 3 in Lower Decks.
It's farm equipment, you idiot. They're farmers.
I'm not an idiot. You expect me to believe that? Shovel and hoe.
The first episode is about helping people versus just blindly following policies. Sometimes you have to do the wrong thing because it's the right decision. Just ask Data. The second is a focus on identity crisis in 2 different ways. On one side, you have a by-the-book officer who can't survive out in the real world, who is paired with another character who has forgotten what being Starfleet is. Then, you have a third character who believes that he must quit what he loves in order to make his friend happy. And you see the acceptance of the crew of him moving from department to department. And the acceptance as he leaves one division to move into the other is just heartwarming.
You have to do what's wrong to survive.
You're right.
Oh, what the?
I'd rather die than let you put your life on the line.
Oh, you are such a psycho! What are you doing? Oh, why?
I'm the first officer of a Federation starship and your commander. And nobody crushes my team.
And what about the third episode? Well, that's about how we can't always be on overdrive to get things done. There has to be buffer time. It's also an analysis of a character who has forgotten what Starfleet is. She doesn't think of Starfleet as one team, one mission. She thinks everyone has a group, everyone has their people, everyone has their own motives. And she learns that those senior officers that she hates so much, yes, some of them she may be right about, but the others, They actually care. They not only care about themselves, but they care about her. They care about others, and that they would die for her and their team. And while they aren't perfect, they aren't bad officers either. So moral quandaries and ethical debates actually occur in this series. So we at least have 2 of the 3. Let's look at the characters. This is, by far, the most frustrating piece of the conversation when people give criticism of Star Trek Lower Decks, because they are either just parroting what they've heard or have some insane biased glasses that they are wearing. First, let's analyze Mariner. She is not a Mary Sue, not by most definitions of the word. An extremely damaged individual, Mariner most likely was a Starfleet officer at the top of her game who ultimately saw that being a part of the senior officer fan club doesn't always mean you're doing a good thing, and that you are often inhibited by protocol and policy to help people. So after giving up her chance at being someone on the senior staff, she went back to being an ensign and probably became an alcoholic at that point. She has forgotten what being Starfleet is, but is still extremely well cultured given her past experiences. I feel like she's written pretty well. And honestly, Mariner is Michael Burnham done right. At least as of the creation of this video. At the moment, only 3 episodes have been released, and in each one, she has been the blunt instrument of the group, and the one to have contacts and on-the-street knowledge. But she's also not all-knowing. She makes mistakes, she doesn't read files, she puts people in danger, and she doesn't look at those around her as a team. She might claim they're friends, but some may wonder. Then we have Boimler, the quintessential by-the-book character. Now, he does have a role as one of the main comedic relief guys. True, there will be jokes that involve him or at his expense. However, people who say he's bumbling or doesn't know his job simply haven't watched the series or, again, are extremely biased. He is competent and even intelligent.
Yeah, but I have a phaser. These guys are lightweights. Yes, when people could do whatever they had to get the job done. You're a great captain. Let them be a great crew.
That's a room of switches and dials you'll never need to go into.
It's actually a pretty important processing hub.
Nobody knows.
He is the best at what he does, and he knows the various regulations. He takes them to an unhealthy extreme, which will be a part of his arc, I'm sure. But Starfleet regulation, Starfleet technology, and getting things done within the system, this is your guy. If we're talking about Starfleet specifically, he has access to get things done that Mariner simply doesn't. Maybe she did at one time, but not now. When it comes to my future waifu Tendi and Starfleet engineer Rutherford, we're not given a whole lot of character building with them just yet. Rutherford seems like a pretty naive and sweet guy, while Tendi is the fish out of water for those who may not know what's going on, or who maybe are new to Star Trek. These characters are distinct. They all have strengths and weaknesses, and all have their own agendas and what they want to do. Mariner wants to be a part of the lower decks where she can make an impact. Boimler wants to become a captain. Tendi wants to be a chief medical officer and explore the universe. And Rutherford wants to fix things and become a great engineer. And we even see, even though this group has wildly different goals, they still don't forget what their primary mission is. All of this doesn't mean that there aren't very stupid things to be hated about Lower Decks. But if you think that it isn't Star Trek, go watch the first season of TNG or like all of the original series. Even when we look at the senior officers, they are gruff at the beginning but seem to get along a lot better as time goes on. Save for the captain. Though, while we're talking about that, a lot of people have gotten upset because of how the senior staff treated the lower decks. While again, that's arguably only 3 of the senior staff, and by episode 3, arguably only 1, maybe 2, this isn't anything new. Riker was and has been absurdly rude and dismissive of lower decks in the TNG episode named, wait for it, Lower Decks. And it's not just that episode, he openly mocked an officer under his command. Broccoli was the name given to him. So don't tell me that there aren't senior officers that aren't like this. The flagship's XO was like this. Moral quandaries, becoming more than the sum of your parts, exploring new places, even if you've already been there. These things are what Lower Decks is. Is it the best example of Trek? No. Is it a complete return to what we know and love? No. But it's close. It's really close. And I think that for what we've got, it's enough. But those are just my opinions. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next Lore Reloaded.